Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I'll be your bartender for today. And I'm sure you've noticed when you go out to some of the bars and restaurants, especially in and around the city, the craft cocktails being served. This has been labeled mixology. And mixology is not necessarily new, though the ingredients and methods have seriously expanded. To better understand the roots of mixology, we're going to go back to the basics. So tonight, we'll be making 4 classic drinks from the list of IBA-approved cocktails. The IBA is the International Bartenders Association. That is a committee of bartenders and bar owners who get together and approve recipes. And it's few and far between that a recipe makes it to this list. So, as a bartender for 15 years, I chose these 4 cocktails because they're well constructed, they're simple to make, and they're really enjoyable. You can make them at home for yourself, for your guests, and using some of the simple ingredients that we have with a few bartending tools, it'll be no problem for you to make them at home. And you could understand better what's on the menu when you go out and order them. So with that, let's start with our first drink, and that's the Moscow Mule. Now the Moscow Mule is served in a copper mug, and the story behind that, supposedly, is that in owner of a bar was brewing his own ginger beer, which is ginger beer, not that ginger beer, this is a new craft ginger beer, and he couldn't move the beer. So his bartender had an overstock of copper mugs down in the basement that he had to get rid of, and the owner of Smirnoff Vodka, who had just purchased it, happened to walk in. They put their heads together and they said, how do we sell all these things? Because Smirnoff wasn't selling well either. And then we have the Moscow Mule. And the Moscow comes from Smirnoff, which was originally made in Moscow. So let's start. We're going to use crushed ice in this, because with the ginger beer and the vodka, it actually sits better in the crushed ice. You stack it, as you can see, and we're going to use a jigger. So here's a jigger, and this is just a measuring cup, specific to alcohol, but you could use it for whatever, I'm sure. Now, we're going to start with vodka. So I used better premium ingredients, and that's the key to any recipe, cocktails, food, whatever it may be. This is Ketel One. I put it in these because I had transferred them. So we're going to start with 2 ounces. 2 ounces of vodka. Pour right into that crushed ice. See how the crushed ice sucks it up? It's perfect. Now, I'm going to open the ginger beer. Ginger beer goes right on top. First, we're going to put some lime juice in. Now, again, ingredients, fresh lime. There's nothing better. You may see this in the store, Rose's lime juice. It's excellent, but it's not as good as fresh limes. So we'll put our first lime in. We're going to use 2 halves, 1 whole. And that's the amount of lime juice you're going to get in this. And with a good lime press, you'll be able to get as much lime juice as the lime will allow. Another half. Remember, the key is ingredients. The better the ingredients, the better the results. Okay. Now we fill it with ginger beer. There you go. No stirring necessary. And we're going to garnish it. Now, garnish is really just for show, but some people may choose to put the garnish in the drink or to eat it, and that's fine. They're all edible, but it is truly for decoration. And here is your Moscow Mule. Next up, we have the daiquiri. Now the daiquiri, and I'm sure you're thinking frozen daiquiri, strawberry daiquiri, banana daiquiri. The daiquiri is a true classic in that it was made in Cuba before the turn of the 20th century. Before the turn of the 19th century, I'm sorry. And it came to America by World War I. It was made by a a American engineer in Cuba in a place called Daiquiri, which is where it got its name, obviously. And it made its way back here through the Navy, and people being exposed to it brought it back to America, and they started drinking in some of the American bars. So the daiquiri is also very basic and very easy to make. But for that, we're going to use this Boston Shaker. Boston Shaker, we're going to put some regular ice, because the ice is just being used to chill. All right, you don't have to fill it. So, again, we're going to use decent ingredients. I prefer premium. This is 8-year-old Bacardi, which we actually have in here. And it was Bacardi in the original because Bacardi was Cuban, the rum that they were using. And that's where this whole idea came from. Okay, so we're going to do 2 ounces of this as well. So 2 ounces. You noticed I cleaned the jigger. If you didn't, make sure that you clean the jigger. Otherwise, you'll have the residue of the previous liquor. So now, that's in there. Again, we may need a little more lime for this. We're going to put fresh lime juice. So we're going to go with, enough. We're going to go with, again, practically a whole lime. Put that right in. Get as much as you can. The other half. Okay. So we have our rum, our lime juice, and simple syrup. Now, I made this. You can make it at home. You could go 1 to 1. So basically the same amount of sugar and water. You just boil it on the stove and you just stir it. And when it cools off, you put it in a bottle and that's fine. 1 to 1, equal parts. So here we're going to go with an ounce of simple syrup, which is going to be quite sweet. Again, you could adjust this to your own preference. Simple syrup. Definitely clean this. Simple syrup gets very sticky. It is sugar. Now, with the Boston Shaker, and if you see bartenders doing that, they're just finding new ways to shake it. This is simple. You're just shaking it. It's about chilling it thoroughly, letting the ice melt a little bit, which cuts the alcohol with a little bit of water. And now, we use this strainer. We use this cocktail glass. And we're going to go right in. And there, we're going to garnish this with a similar lime. And you have your daiquiri. Not frozen, just chilled. Notice the consistency, the color is a little different than you're used to. This is just rum, simple syrup, and lime juice. Another classic. Next up, we have the French 75. So, the French 75 is named after a French piece of artillery used in World War I. It was very effective to keep the German army, who was trying to invade France at the time, or did invade France. It kept them at bay for a little bit. The idea is that this is very potent, so you want to be careful. Now, originally this is made with gin. We're going to use cognac because there's a bar called French 75 in New Orleans that supposedly invented this. Again, the history of cocktails is very hard to trace. So they supposedly invented it. They use cognac, which is basically a French, not basically, it is a French fortified wine. Just like sherry, port, those are old wines. Cognac, Armagnac. So that's gonna be our base instead of gin, okay? And it's gonna go in a flute. So for this, we're gonna use, same deal, the shaker, we're just gonna use a different shaker here. So this has a top. Again, I'm just gonna put some ice in it. Now, again, cognac. This is actually Baron Ochard. I got this in France. And this is an XO. So if you see VSOP, VS, XO, XO just means extremely old. A VSOP means it's a very select type of cognac, and it's old, but not as old as XO, so that's why XO is a little more expensive. Okay, so for the French 75, we're simply going to put our cognac, and we're going to do 2 ounces of that. Now I have the cognac in here, and here we go. I got with the jigger, always good to measure. Now we're going to go with a little bit of lemon juice on this one. So here's your lemon. Cut that in half. We're going to do the same deal. Back into the press. Fresh lemon juice. Fresh lemon juice. We're going to do 1 whole lemon, of course. Okay. And for this is a different top, so there's no need to strain because the strainer is built in. There you go. Shake it. I'm going to pour that in. Make some room for the second ingredient, which is, of course, being it's French 75, is champagne. Champagne, we're actually using Prosecco. They use Moet. I don't recommend that. It's a wonderful champagne. You should drink that separate. So we're using Prosecco, which is basically an Italian champagne. You cannot call your beverage champagne unless it's grown, the grapes are grown in Champagne, France. So that's why it's champagne. And that's it. We're going to top it with this. We're going to garnish it. Since we used the lemon, it's nice to use the lemon. This is a peeler. We're just going to get a nice peel. I'm going to take the essence, squeeze that in a little bit. And there, you may see this sometimes with the orange as well. Same deal. Little squeeze. And the garnish is for decoration, so you want it to make the drink look even tastier than it already is. So there you have the French 75. And lastly, we're going to do the Old Fashioned. The Old Fashioned is a very funny story because the reason it's called an Old Fashioned, the Old Fashioned cocktail, is because a cocktail originally meant that you had bitters, sugar, and alcohol. So when someone asked for a cocktail, they were asking for what is now known as an old-fashioned. The story goes that a man went into a bar and he said, I would like a cocktail the old-fashioned way. And this became the old-fashioned. So the old-fashioned, in a rocks glass or an old-fashioned glass, I like to use 1 cube because it just chills it. I'll keep this here for now while we're concocting it. Now this we're going to make in a mixing glass. So mixing glass, I'm going to add some ice. And first, we're going to add our, what's going to get muddled. So now, going to put another slice of orange in, because that's going to get muddled. Just a piece. We're going to add simple syrup, like I said. And the oranges, in addition, some people put it, some people don't. Some people put a whole slice of orange, some people put a cherry. We're just using a heavy orange peel. But the sugar, you cannot do without. They used to use little sugar blocks. We're using simple syrup. It's the same consistency, the same amount of sugar. So we're going to put an ounce of sugar. I'm going to try to not get it everywhere. Now we have bitters. So bitters, you might see in these bottles, there's so many different flavors of bitters. Today we're going to use this. This is a bourbon bitters. A nice little dropper. And it's just filled with. So we're just going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it should be really tasty. So we have our simple syrup, our bitters, and now we're going to put our bourbon. So our bourbon is Maker's Mark, which is wonderful. It's a premium. And we're going to do 2 ounces. So make sure we clean this. And there we go. Now we're going to muddle, and this is your muddler. I actually have a spoon that has a muddler on the back, so you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but regardless, as long as it gets muddled. So you're just really pressing it in to release some of the juices in the orange. You don't want to break it up too much. And now we add some ice again. And we're going to stir. We're really going to stir. This is a very large, I don't know if you guys saw it, a very large mixer glass. So ideally, you would give a quick rinse to everything. This is going right in here. But you don't want to get extra ice in. And now for the garnish. So we could garnish it with regular cherries. These are regular maraschino cherries. The red ones. That apparently one of them. But we're going to use these anyway. So these are the Luxardo. And these are excellent for cocktails. So we're going to put one of these, and we're also going to put, so people tend to use oranges. We'll put a slice of orange. We'll put some cherry. And the Luxardo have a bit of alcohol, so if you want to use them for something else, just be aware of that. We'll put one on either side just to give it a nice look. Here goes your old fashioned. Now, these drinks are simple. They're easy to make at home, and it helps you understand the origins of everything that you see in the craft cocktail. The craft cocktail specialty that's been coming out. So, with the Moscow Mule, the Daiquiri, the French 75, and the Old Fashioned, you have a base with which to explore all the classics, and you should be confident in ordering and making them for your guests. Enjoy.